This is the first time I've tried this Hangouts on Air recording stuff, so hopefully it goes well, and if anyone needs a copy of the lecture, we'll be able to post a video of them. But we may have issues with the first couple sessions. I'm figuring out all the kinks there. As Dan said again, I'm Jared. I've been doing software development, over a decade now professionally. I went to school for computer science. I moved out here and worked with IBM for about 8 years, and then with Lenovo for just a little under a year, and now I'm with another company called Nautilus. They do some software for libraries, so I've worked on everything from back-end type hardware stuff to a lot of web front-end work is what I'm doing nowadays. So if you have, as we go through the course, if you have any questions about different aspects of software development, what it's like in the industry, what different areas are like, anything like that, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has at any point in time. So for this course itself, I'll talk about the course first and then we'll go to Slack. This course is going to be using Ruby to teach you the basics of software development. Chose Ruby because it's a very user-friendly language. It's a lot easier to learn than some of the more complex languages. It also has interpretive capability, which means you can see results immediately instead of having a long delay between coding something and seeing if it worked. So it works really well. It maps pretty closely to just straight language instead of being more complex to understand. We're going to go over the basics of what would be pretty much in any modern programming language through Ruby. So we're going to start with just very simple items, and I'll get a posted, more concise, like step-by-step syllabus over the next few days. But we're going to start with some very simple concepts. There's going to be like variables and calling functions and working on stuff like that. If anyone's familiar with any of this language, that's great. If you're not, don't worry about it because you're going to get introduced to it all throughout the course. And then we're going to work our way probably up through objects and classes, which are a way to organize stuff and a way to help you structure your code in a very logical way, a way to help you think about stuff. There will be like homework to work on. So we'll see how we end up balancing that between talking in class over the material versus doing class time to spend time doing homework and stuff. That'll probably vary a little bit back and forth in terms of how much time we spend on each area, but I'll be getting those out to you as well. And the main way we're probably going to communicate for this course will be on Slack. So I hope everyone's gotten a invitation to join Slack already. Does anyone know if you haven't gotten an invitation to join Slack or you're not in Slack at all yet? All right, it's great. So I haven't set it up. I guess I could do it right now, but we'll set up a separate channel just for this class. And then I'll go ahead and get everyone added to this channel so that we can communicate through that channel and not have to fill up the other areas that some of our other classes or groups have their conversations in. So we'll get that set up, and that's where we'll post the videos from classes, links to the videos. That's where we'll post the homework or the links to what you guys should be able to do in between classes. It's where we'll get sort of all of that structure and content set up. So if you're not on there yet, you haven't already joined, you're not actively in there, I'd really encourage you to do that. Once we have that channel set up, ask questions. If you have any questions, ask them. Just be very interactive on it, because the more you ask, I guarantee you other people are going to have the same questions or similar questions. You're not asking something that's silly or anything like that, because that happens all the time where multiple people have the same question. And a lot of times they don't necessarily ask it, and so then they get a little stuck on something that could have easily been solved or easily helped multiple people get over a hurdle. So just the more conversation we have both in class or in Slack, the better for all of that. All right. So for anyone who hasn't done any programming before, I think this is a great example of what it's sort of going to look like, what it's going to feel like for you as we're programming, and you're starting to learn this stuff. Is you're going to feel really excited at first. You're going to feel like you're learning a ton very, very quickly, and hey, I've got this thing. Programming's not that hard. This is easy. This is something that I'm going to be able to do. And then you're going to hit a hurdle. Probably halfway, a little more through the class, I'm guessing. Probably when we start introducing things like objects. And that's going to, this dip in programming, this is big. And it's noticeable. And it's not going to end at the end of this class. You're going to be, probably by the time we're in the end of this class, you're either going to be somewhere over here feeling like you've got stuff, or you're going to be on your way down this. Because this is a big dip. Once you start learning the concepts of how to program and what you're doing, you begin to realize just how huge this field is, how much there is to know, how many concepts there are, how many tools there are, and how hard it is. And so it's going to be a challenge, but if you're willing to push through that and really work through that, where you're feeling very challenged and stuff, you feel like, oh man, I'm really not getting this. There's just too much going on. You're going to be able to see rewards at the end where you're actually able to build things that you want to build. You're accomplishing really cool things. And this isn't a one-time thing when you're learning how to program either. This isn't, I've learned how to program, and now, great, everything's, peachy keen, and I'm just doing fantastic. Every time I'm learning a new technology, like I am right now on my job using some new technologies, and I'm somewhere probably around here on that curve, because I've been sitting here for half a year, picking stuff up as fast as I can, trying to understand it, just running my head into a wall, and now a lot of it's going together, it's making sense, I'm able to build stuff much more quickly, and I'm moving back up. So I encourage you, if you start to feel that way, recognize it's not you, it's not like you don't get it, it's just an aspect of what it means to try and pick up a field like this. And you can get a lot, the great thing is there's a lot of value even if you just get to this point and you're like, hey, I picked up a ton of stuff, and being a full-time software developer, maybe not my thing, or continuing on, you still learned a lot, not just about how computers work, but you'll have a lot more tools in your tool belt that you can use each and every day at that point in time.
That's very accurate for me. In fact, the line, as you can see, is very gradual. So as you enter the dip, it's going to feel kind of endless. But once it starts to feel gradually higher, then you can actually see the tip of the mountain. But it is very important to just keep pushing through even if it's a little too overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, it's just a very challenging. I mean, you get a lot real fast, and you begin to see how huge the field is, and it happens time and time and time again. All right, so let's go over to Cloud9. Everyone should have also gotten an invitation to join the Code the Dream group on Cloud9. Did everyone receive an invitation to that? I think I saw that most people have accepted it, but there were some that maybe hadn't accepted the invitation in Cloud9 yet. I encourage you to get on that as soon as you get the chance. What Cloud9 is basically a computer in the cloud. So they just have these computers that you're able to use, and we use it for a couple of reasons. One is it gives us the same, and what this would be called in development is an IDE, integrated development environment. So Cloud9 is really targeted at writing code in different ways. And one of the main things they provide is this environment that gives you just about everything you need to do developments with Ruby or with other languages all in one place. And so that's one of the great things about Cloud9. And one of the other great reasons that we use it is it's going to standardize us. So instead of having to deal with the differences between somebody's Mac and somebody's Windows computer, and they're having problems because of their different environments and stuff's not configured the same. By using Cloud9, we're all going to have pretty much the exact same environments that we're working in, which means that we're not going to have to figure out, oh, why didn't it install on my Windows machine? You're just logging into the Cloud9 website and working with it that way. Cloud9 has a little, let me see if I can find it over here, a guided tour that's available inside of the, let me make this even bigger. A guided tour that's available inside of it where you can see the different features of the Cloud9 workspace and environment. So I encourage you to check that out and click through the guided tour and get to know a little bit about the different.
Hey Jared, how did you get there? That screen.
To Cloud9.
When I go into it, I end up here.
Perfect. So what you're going to want to do once you've logged into Cloud9 and you'll get to exactly what he showed is, let me see if I can get to that screen right now. You're going to see something like what he was seeing here. Oh, I'm in my workspace and not the admin one, I think. Oh wait, workspaces. Dun, dun.
Just have to create a new workspace. Is that what they
Yeah, there we go. So what you should see is something like this, but I already have a workspace here. So what you're going to want to do when you get into Cloud9 is create a new workspace. And then what I suggest you use for your workspace, at least right now, is to just use the blank workspace. That way you're not going to get a whole bunch of, let me check something real fast. Yeah. Yeah, just use the blank workspace option when you go to create your new workspace. You can call it whatever you want. I called it mine like Ruby Basics for this, and then click Create Workspace. And then it might take a little while for it to spin up an environment for you. But eventually what you should get once you've done that is something like this. And like I was saying, I encourage you to check out the tutorial, the guided tour, and learn a little bit about the different aspects of it. Most of these probably won't make a lot of sense to you at this point in time because you haven't done much software development before, if any. And so when you're seeing things that say, oh, you got a full Linux terminal, you know, preview my app code, run my app as a file, like most of that's not going to matter that much. But it's good to know what functionality they have. Also, for this course, we're probably going to spend 80%, if not more, of our time in terms of interacting with Ruby, with it directly from the command line. So that means a lot of this IDE, Integrated Development Environment functionality that's really powerful when you start doing more complex apps or other things, we're not going to use quite as much of that. Instead, we're really going to focus on that command line portion. All right. I'm going to be going back and forth between my notes here to make sure I'm going through the stuff I wanted to cover. So, who here has ever worked on like a terminal or command line? These are all sort of interchangeable terms. Who's ever done much in the command line or terminal before on their computer? Anyone? Some, anything? Some? All right. Right. This isn't an interface that most people use, right? Most people, if they know anything about it, might be thinking like it's not like something ancient like DOS. Why would anyone be working in an interface like this? I don't know.
I used to have so many computers that were DOS before like the Windows age.
Right.
I used to have PC Junior that was DOS.
Exactly.
All DOS. A lot of PC. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I got introduced to a lot of this back on DOS and stuff and hacking some files to play video games.
Yeah.
That's sort of what got me into programming originally. Was I had a computer and it didn't have enough, it had just enough memory to play a game, but DOS used too much of that memory for audio and mouse support. So there was a way to, there were a couple files in DOS that told it what to do when it booted up and what to configure. And what you could do is go into those and like change what it did. So I basically pulled out audio and mouse support from it, and then that freed up enough memory for me to run my game, but I just didn't have a mouse. So then I was tinkering around trying to find like, how much can I have? Like, what can I have and can't I have? And still run this game. And that's what got me into programming in the first place, was playing around with stuff like that. Sounds like most of you aren't very familiar with the command line. If you want to think about a command line, the easiest way to think about it is it's just another way to interact with your computer. We're used to the GUI. We're used to clicking around on things, and I've got, like, on my Mac, for example, I have my Finder that lets me look in different folders and find pictures. I've got, you know, my photo library that I can go down through. I can go down through my development folders and stuff. Like, that's one way to interact with things. I can drag this window around. All of that is just one way to interact with your computer. And yeah, did I make this full screen? I did. Okay, perfect. And the command line is just another way to interact with it. Now, you can't interact with every program from the command line the same way you can with the GUI, but there are also programs that you can only interact with on the command line that you really don't have a GUI interface to. So I think the first thing to realize, as I was saying, is it's just another way to interact. And when you're in the command line, there are a few things that sort of help orient yourself, figure out what's going on, where am I, what am I doing, and what can I do. The first thing is you're always in a folder somewhere. You're always at a specific location in your command line. So in this case, what you'll see, this is going to work. In this case, we got this little squiggly mark and then workspace. So this squiggly mark is just a shorthand notation to say home, your home folder. So on most Unix or Linux or even Mac computers, there's something known as a home folder. Windows has it too, but they sort of disguise that concept a little more. And it's just a place to put your files versus someone else's files, right?
Like if you do echo home, like show the
Yeah. If I do, I'll start showing commands in a minute, but if I do like pwd, like you can see that I'm in home Ubuntu because I just started that default blank workspace, and so they gave me the username Ubuntu for that. And then I'm in the workspace folder inside of home. And a lot of times what you're going to get when you're working in the command line is something that helps you figure out where you're at. It doesn't have to do that. You can change what this is showing you, but it's a very common behavior to show you like, oh, where am I at, so that I know what's going on. And then after that is just where you put commands to your computer that you want it to run on the command line. So I already did one, which was pwd. Pwd is shorthand. A lot of these commands have been around for 30 plus years on Unix systems, so people are lazy. They didn't want to type long things, so they've got very short, cryptic commands for a lot of this stuff. It takes a little bit to memorize them and figure out what you're doing, but then you become actually grateful that you're not having to type out present working directory or something like that. So that's what pwd stands for, is what directory am I in? Pwd is just the longer way of getting what you're already showing right here. It's showing you where am I. And it's an example of a command, just like when you're interacting with a photo app or your web browser in your computer. This is some little program that's running that's accomplishing something for you, telling you where you're at. So some of the other ones that you're going to be using quite frequently on the command line will include ls. And ls is just shorthand for list. So that's very similar, you know, when I was in my Finder just a moment ago. ls is like showing me all those files that are in that folder. So I'm in this workspace folder, and here's the files that already exist in that folder. And then another common one that you're going to use, probably the most frequent one that you'll use, is CD, which stands for Change Directory. And CD, if I type it just by itself, then what it does is it actually sends me to my home directory. It's just what it tries to do. It says, oh, where's your home? Let's go there, because you didn't give me any parameters whatsoever. But I can tell it where I want to go. So let me type this ls again to list where I'm at, because now I'm in home instead of in the workspace. Okay, I want to go back into my workspace folder. So let's change directory into workspace and hit enter. And now I'm back in my workspace folder and working out of there. And that's what I'll be able to see. Any questions about this so far? Feel free to ask if you have any questions at any point in time, by the way. So I'd say these are by far CD and ls. If there's any two commands to really learn and just practice really fast, those are the most important ones. You're going to be doing them all the time as you're moving between folders, as you're looking at what's actually in this folder. Am I where I thought I was? You know, does this have the files I think I had there? So there's some other shorthands with some of this, like when you're doing CD and I want to go down a folder, I want to go back to my home folder, but I want to do it in a different way. I can do it with ... That's a way to say go down a folder. And there's different parameters like that that you're able to pass in or shorthand. So what CD does is it takes some additional arguments. So we're going to talk about programming. This is a program. I ran CD and I passed it an argument to do something with. In this case, I just passed it the go down one folder argument. In the other case that we did before, I passed it go to the workspace folder from where I'm currently at, add workspace, and let's go into that folder.
Do you have to type the backslash after workspace? Or did you do CD workspace?
You could do workspace, I believe. Let me check. And it would work as long as there's not a file there. You should be fine. You should never have any conflicts. The backsplash, I'm not actually typing it. I'm using another useful trick worth knowing, but this will come as you use the command line more and more, is the tab key. Tab key will, in many situations, try and autocomplete something for you. So in this case, when I type CDW and I hit tab, this program or the console that we're working in, the terminal, will check and see, is there anything that makes sense to me right now to autocomplete for this? And typically what it's doing when it checks to see if something makes sense is it's looking for any files that match that name. So let me go into workspace real fast, and I think I can give another example that'll be a little more interesting for that. Let's see here. What? Well, hold on. Touch color.txt. All right. So now I've added another file here that's the same as color.rb, right? And I'm going to go ahead and use a different command. Let's use cat. And this is just a way to spit out what you have at the console. And I'm going to try the tab key. I'll type C to try and get the color, and I'll hit the tab key. And if you look at it, it wasn't able to just autofill something in for me because it looked at all those different files and it said, oh, you've got multiple options here that all match. I hit tab twice and it showed me all the options that matched, but only the ones that matched. So if I wanted to have it autocomplete, it's telling me I need to add a little more information. So like if I hit D now, it's able to know, oh, there's nothing else with code of ethics. But if I hit L, it'll go as far as it can on that autocomplete and say, I can't, I don't know what you mean. I don't know if you mean the RB file or the TXT file. Which one do you want me to show, right? So if I say like RB, what CAT does is just outputs the contents of that file to the terminal window, just boom, right there. It's gonna be really useful, but as you can see, for example, with this file, there's too much content there for you to see it all. So that means now I have to scroll up in order to see the content. And if I did the longer one, the code of ethics, which is even more, well, there's way too much for me to actually be able to see all of that on here in any reasonable way. So what can I do maybe to clean that up? Well, first off, what I'm gonna do, because I just want this console to look clean, is I can type clear, or I can do Control L. And all that does is sort of clean it up. It's like, get rid of this garbage that was on the screen, make it nice and easy and clean. Clear also works the same way. Now that's what you did isn't gone. It just happens to have cleared your screen so that it's easier to work from there. All right, so let's say I wanted to look at that code of ethics file and I wanted to see it, actually be able to read it bit by bit instead of having this big wall of text all show up at once. We've got some other command line programs that exist. One of the popular ones out there is called Less. And this is a really, really popular one that you probably end up using a fair bit too. Less or more. People use both. I tend to use Less. And what Less does is, you notice that cat file spit everything out on the screen at once. Less did something different. We're no longer just sitting at that terminal prompt where we can interact with it the same way we could before. Like I can't just type something in the way I could before at the terminal prompt. Instead, now I'm actually in this Less program, and it's reading the file and outputting it to the screen, but it's doing it page by page, and I can hit the space button to go down another page and see the next page worth of content. Less also lets you, using U, I believe, go back up pages as well, see content. So if you have like a large file and you're trying to read it on the console, that's a useful tool. Problem is now I'm in another program. Like, how do I get out of this and back to my console? What do I do? And each program is going to be different. Less is pretty simple. You just hit Q for quit to step out of it, and that works really well. All right, let me see what I have here for notes. So I've done some directory navigation in the command line. These are the sort of tools you're going to need, because when you're learning programming, you almost always start at some sort of command line level, somewhere like this, because it just removes a lot of the complexity of trying to do a GUI application. So we're going to need to be able to navigate directories. Like here, I went down a couple directories. You're going to need to be able to, oops, see I didn't hit tab there. You're going to need to be able to create files. You saw me just a moment ago, for example, create this color.txt file. Now you don't have to do that from the command line. You can easily come in here and right click or do something like that and say create a new file. That works just fine. But if you're sitting on the command line, you're already working there. You know, maybe you want to create files. So what I did before was like touch. Touch is just a way to create a file with the name that you gave it on the command line. It's just a really quick shorthand for that. You've got different tools for reading files that we've already seen, cat and Less. Probably going to be using both of those quite frequently when you're working in the command line. And then sometimes Oh yeah, you're going to also be able to want to delete files and stuff like that. So this color.txt, let's say I don't want that file anymore. That was a mistake. What can I do to delete that? The command for that is rm. So rm will remove or delete that file. You want to be careful with that because unlike what you might be used to, you don't have a trash or anything else going on here like, oh, this puts it in a trash, this puts it somewhere nice and safe. That file's gone. Whatever you just deleted is going to be gone unless you did something. So, and if you're very dangerous, you might do this to like a higher level folder. When I was in a class one time, I deleted my entire home folder by accident with everything in it instead of the one like subfolder I intended to delete. And I couldn't understand what was going on. I'm like, why isn't anything working anymore? What broke? I don't get it. So it's very useful, but you want to be careful. Don't shoot your foot off by deleting more than you intended to. Okay, I think the next thing is working in the command line. It's another environment. Again, you're not going to be very familiar with it. You're going to get in a situation where you've messed up. Like the less example, for example, and that's not necessarily a mess up, but okay, now I've gotten in this program. What do I don't know how to get out of it. Let's say I didn't instead of actually knowing how to get out of it. So there's different approaches. Like here at the command line, let me give an example of, so now I'm in a weird state. I no longer have this nice place where I can just type a command. If I try and type CD, it's not going to work. It's all funky. What can I do to get out of it? Probably the most common thing is Control-C. It's sort of like an escape hatch, if you will. Get me out of here. Something's going wrong. I don't know what it is. And that'll happen in a lot of different types of scenarios. Control-Z is also sometimes used. It depends on your environment. So for example, I typed IRB earlier. This is actually a Ruby environment that I'm in now. And if I'm trying to figure out how to get out of here and I don't know how to, I might be like Control-C. That's not doing anything for me. Control-Z is something that some applications respond to help get you out of them as well. So those are a couple sort of escape hatches when you've gotten in a situation that's not working. Another one, especially since we're all using Cloud9, we're all the same here, is just open a new terminal window and just close your other one. I don't know what's going on. I can't figure out how to fix it. Let me just close this terminal window and open a new one that's going to be clean and not have that problem. So again, these are things that are going to happen to you. I guarantee you're going to run into problems like this. Don't worry about it. It happens to everyone. All right. A couple more things on the command line. This is really what we're going to be focusing on today, is just giving you these underlying tools so that when we start talking about IRB and we start getting into some of this other stuff, it'll be a lot easier for you to work with them as opposed to having to learn that at the same time. So with any of these commands, like the ls command, they might have additional ways to run them. Like if I do ls-a, for example, I get some extra stuff that didn't show up before. So earlier, there was this list of files, and now suddenly it shows up different, and I have these extra entries here. Well, those, first off, those are presented with a dot, and that's sort of just an accepted convention for I don't want to see this file normally. It's a way to hide, quote unquote, the file, but not really hide it. Just when I'm working normally, I don't care to see this because maybe it's just about this environment, but anyone's still going to be able to see it if they try and look at all the files. Another one is like ls-l. Well, that means the -l is sort of a shorthand for long, which means give me a lot more information about these files than I got before. Now I've got, this is, probably don't need to worry about any of this, but this will be like, this is how big the file is. And this is the last time it was edited, here's the name of the file.
They're also commonly referred to as flags, right?
Yes, yeah.
So you'll hear that you have a command with a flag
Yep. You'll hear flag L, dash L, or just even arguments like yeah, pass it with L and a parameter or something like that. A lot of times they won't specify the dash type thing. Okay, but I can't read how big those files are. I don't know what 19,374 bytes means. So maybe I can add in another parameter here, this H, and now I've got something that's a lot more readable. Oh, Code of Ethics is 19 kilobytes. I understand that a lot more than I understood 19,374 bytes. Now, you're not going to remember all these. You're not going to remember them for really any of these commands, and pretty much every one of these programs, if you will, lets you pass parameters to it of some kind. So the easiest way, if you're in the console to try or terminal to try and figure any of that out, is man. This stands for man pages, or the manual, if you will. And if you do something like man ls, now I'm in something that's a lot like less. It tells me it right here at the bottom. Like press Q to quit. You can't really see it, unfortunately, but press Q to quit, H for help. But this is sort of your documentation of how the ls command works. So what did we do before? We used dash A. Let's look at that. Dash A says, do not ignore entries starting with dot. That's exactly what it did when we used the dash A parameter. And then we used what else? We used the lowercase l and lowercase h, right? So let's try and find these. What does H mean? It means human readable. So with flag L, print sizes in human readable formats instead of in bytes. And L, or flag L or whatever, is use a long listing format. It just means show us a lot more information about them than you would have otherwise.
Hey, Jared, how do I get to that page?
How do you get to
Manual, where I can see all the parameters.
the parameters? Yes, it's I wish I could scroll this up. I need to keep clearing because I see that I'm at the bottom. Man, it's just another program. I could. Let me see here.
It asks what manual page do you want.
Yep. And so what you'll do is tell it the program, then give it the program name that you're trying to run, like ls or man cd. Well, there's not one for cd. It's like, this is too simple. You're not always going to have one, but man ls. And it'll give me the arguments for that. Or if I did man pwd, print the name of the current working directory. And here's some arguments I can pass into that. So what else have we learned? What are some of the other command line tools that we've already used besides touch? Let's see if it has that. Change file timestamps. She said, wait a minute, didn't you tell me that's how you create a file? Like, why does it say it's change file timestamps? That's weird. It's because in the Unix world, people have sort of changed the way that a lot of stuff works. I shouldn't say change, but they use stuff for what it wasn't really originally intended for. Touch was originally intended as a way to say, when I've touched this file, that, and then the timestamp saying the last time it's been edited or whatever is now. But people quickly realized, oh, it also creates a file. It's the easiest way to create a file, so I'll just touch a new file name, right? So there you go. There's even arguments for touch. Any other ones? Cat. So what does cat do? Concatenates the files and prints to the standard output. Standard output is the other name for what's happening in your console. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't need to know about, but there's this standard output thing and the console just reads it and spits it out here. You'll notice also I'm using console, terminal, command prompt. I'm using all those interchangeably. It'll be called all of those in any given place. So you just need to be used to that sort of interchangeability. But yeah, man pages are one of the best tools you have if you're trying to learn what the commands are for something. Otherwise, feel free to like search for it, right? Linux terminal list files. And Google will be able to help you out, and a lot of times we'll have answers for you right there. And there's fantastic tutorials and documentation out there on this stuff. In fact, we'll have some links in the class notes and the homework to some really good overviews of the command line and command prompt and how to use this stuff some more. Because you don't necessarily need to know all the details of it, but it's a very powerful tool to get familiar with. All right, just a couple more topics for today, for the most part. One of them is another powerful shorthand on the command line. It are using your arrow keys. So if I hit arrow up, what it's going to do is actually show me the last command that I ran. And I can hit that again over and over and go up through the list of commands that I've run. I find this is really useful when, first off, you're like, what did I just run or what happened? But also really useful when you're like switching between a few different commands and you're running them back and forth or doing something, and it's a lot easier than typing that command in again. So if you hit arrow down, it just goes back down through the ones, but only after you've arrowed up to some of these. So that's just a really, really useful shorthand. And there's a lot of this. In fact, a lot of these shorthands exist. One of the reasons people work on the command line a lot of times in development and things like that is, depending on how familiar you are with it and what you're trying to do, you can sometimes be much more efficient on a command line than you can in a GUI. There's certain actions, there's certain things that are just a lot easier to accomplish in a command line than they are in a GUI, and that's one of the reasons that it's still a very popular interface. It's a lot easier, for example, to send, if I'm calling a program and I want to send it 20 different arguments of some kind with different, I want to set 20 different flags, but those might be different each time I call it. It's a lot easier to type that out on a command line than it is to have some big, huge, complex configuration screen come up and I'm like, I want these options out of the 50 that are available. I want these 5, and then I want to give them these values. It's a lot easier to have that sort of flexibility on the command line. All right. So I think I've already talked about this, but this is an introduction to programming class. All of these things that we're running, like man, cd, ls, every one of these is just a program itself that you're just invoking from the command line, as opposed to, you're probably familiar with running programs from here. Like Finder is a program to help you find stuff in your operating system if you're on a Mac. Scroll back. I hate Finder. Or Slack is a program, or any of that stuff. These are just programs the same way that those are, except they happen to, their interface, instead of being a GUI interface, this point-and-click interface, it's a text-based interface to work with the program. Some programs provide both. Some programs provide both a GUI interface and a text interface to work with them. And so you can work either way. But these are, a lot of these have been around for a long time. A lot of these are actually very small, relatively simple programs. And so this is sort of the starting place for a lot of coding, is you're going to start with these smaller command line type elements, these smaller GUI or text interface things, and then you'll build up to GUI type interfaces or other interfaces like that over time. So let's do one more. This is another popular one. It's not built, a lot of these are sort of built into the operating system, if you will. They've been around for so long that you can almost guarantee that they're there. This other one isn't necessarily that way, but it's another really powerful, popular one, and it's called curl. So let's see if we have a man page for it. I don't know if we will or not. Curl. All right, let's learn a little bit about it. It's transfer a URL. So it's a tool to get data from a web page or something like that to your computer from the command line as opposed to from a browser. The standard way that we get data is we go to a browser. So I can actually do that same thing on the command line. So let's go over here, and this is a list of books that are just simple textbooks. Let's grab one, for example. And what I did in the web browser was I just downloaded that text and then rendered it onto this screen. Well, I can do that same thing on the command line as well with curl. So I do curl, and then the URL for that file. I just pulled down all of that content and rendered it right here into my command line instead of rendering it in a web browser. Now, this won't necessarily always render it the way you expect. Let's look at a different example instead. So let's do this instead of an actual, instead of an actual text file, let's do the folder of all those files. That doesn't look anything like what that web page looked like. That's because, you know, in your web browser, it understands what all this special language means and renders it a specific way with structure. That's what you're seeing here is all that structure. And the curl tool, it doesn't interpret that to give you any structure at all. It just pulls down the raw content and shows it to you. But let's say that was great, but I can't read that whole book. I couldn't even scroll all the way up. My command history couldn't even remember all of that. So what do? Well, maybe there's a option. There's probably going to be too many, so I'm probably not going to want to do this because curl is a very big, complex application. But maybe there's an option here that lets me save to a file. Okay, looks like I have something here. Got this -O option that says output to a file. Write the output to a file instead of to standard out. We already saw earlier that whenever we write something to standard out with cat, it goes right to the console. Okay, so let's try this -O parameter. And let's say this file was Flatland. Okay. Now, how do I look at the files in my folder again? ls. So let's see here. All right, I've got a flatland.txt file. Let's see how big it is. Looks a lot bigger than the other files I'm working with, 52K. So it's probably what I'm looking for. Anyone else remember how I can look at a file bit by bit instead of all at once? All right. Well, that's not right. Did I grab the wrong URL? Yep, looks like I did. So let's try this instead. I don't know if this will work. I don't know if it'll overwrite the file automatically or not, but we'll see. Okay, let's check the file size again. Oh, that's a lot bigger, 197K instead of 56K. There we go. That's sort of what I'm looking for. Yeah. So that's, I mean, really an introduction to command lines or text interfaces, working with stuff in this way. I think that's about what they got to in the first class last time. Now, in the future, I'm probably going to try and spend less time up here and more time working on, you know, like lab work or homework type stuff in class so that we can make it more of a collaborative environment where you guys are, if you have any problems, we're working through them and stuff like that. But for the first session, I really just wasn't prepared for that. I'm going to get this sent out really soon, a link posted to our own group on Slack. And this will be a little bit of just what I would like you to try and do in Cloud9 between now and I guess Tuesday for the next class. And this will just be a refresh of a lot of what we've already done. And then a little bit of new stuff some resources for you, and then a little bit of new stuff sort of getting into Ruby and just barely starting to play around with that. And we'll sort of take off from there in the next class and build on that. And hopefully you'll really get going with programming starting next time.
Also, the Windows command line is a little bit different too, right? So if anybody starts playing with it,
Yeah,